You're listening to the Bitching and Bolusing Podcast with Courtney and Brittany. Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Bitching and Bolusing Podcast. I'm Brittany.
And I'm Courtney. And welcome to our next episode. I'm a little nervous about this, Britt.
You are,
I'm not going to lie.
Anxiously excited about this episode.
Yes, I am. And, it's one of those things where I think this is a really great topic, and it's going to create some really great discussions. And just like a lot of our other topics, we are definitely going to ruffle some feathers, and we're gonna end up making some people angry. But again, I want to preface it all with that is not our intention to anger or offend anybody. But I think that we love to just touch on things that really need to be discussed. And today's main topic is going to be focused on pseudoscience and predatory behaviors of pseudoscience in the medical community. So this is a tricky one, guys.
I think it's tricky because we touch on a couple things, right? We're going to touch on like the bigger pseudoscience issue around there, the things that people like swear by and are spending a shit ton of money on, right? And then there's also kind of like the trickle down where like the MLM people, and there is a very large predatory factor for people who are doing MLM towards people who have disabled kids. But at the same time, there are a lot of people who have disabled kids who are kind of doing MLM businesses to keep their household afloat. So
survive, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that that's kind of, this is where we don't want to necessarily offend, but we also do want to bring awareness to the fact that it is a really big issue right now. I think Courtney and I probably both have lived experiences, but it is a huge issue where parents are preyed upon. And the thing is that we are in such a vulnerable state as parents. Whether you have a disabled kid or not, you just want the best for your child. Right now you throw in disability, medical complexity, and you're even more desperate to give your kid the best quality of anything that you can. And there's so many things that come at parents because, we are not, as parents, immune to ableism. We're not. Like, we all, to some extent, have ableism within us. And, we have these big companies or these small companies, and they come at us and they, essentially sell us a cure or almost a cure for our kids' disabilities or medical complexities. And whether parents want to admit it or not, like at some point, we have all been like, oh yeah, we can cure this.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to start this conversation with a recent experience that I have. So let's start with the idea of pseudoscience treatments that are more on like a bigger medical pharmaceutical scale. Particularly, there's something new out there called neurocytonics. And this is a treatment that has come about for, it's a little tricky because neurocytonics is a radio frequency MRI-esque machine that has been said to cure many things. And I mean many things. It started where it cured cartilage and joints, and then it went on to cure cancer. And by the way, just so you know, it has no proof of curing either of those things, but this is what the machine is said to have done. And now it's being marketed and repurposed for treating essentially brain injuries. This is why it stands out for Brittany and I in our community, because obviously our kids have brain injuries. And neurocytonics is something that I have been interested in. I'm not going to lie. This is why it's so fresh in my mind. I even did the consultation with the company that runs the program, and it's located in Monterrey, Mexico. And I spoke to the doctors, and I did a Q&A to get more information because this machine is saying, well, not the machine is saying, but the company that has this machine is saying that they can regrow brain matter. And they're providing a lot of quote unquote scientific proof, right? Imaging and all these different things that this machine that uses mostly radio frequencies, and it's a targeted radio frequency treatment, 1 hour a day for 28 days straight. And apparently over time, it will regrow brain matter. And obviously, if you have a brain injury and you're regrowing brain matter, you're creating new neural pathways. Like it's not really marketed as a cure. I want to highlight that, but it is marketed more to improve the life of people with brain injuries. And that's super fucking exciting if it's true, right? Like think about all the things about the discomfort, the complications medically with brain injuries. If you could in some way ease that for your child or a loved one, because this machine and this program is for anybody. It's not specific to an age. If you could do that, of course, if it worked, who wouldn't want to do that, right? But I have to tell you, it is a staggering cost.
Yeah.
It is $50,000 per 28-day treatment. And when you speak to the representatives of the company, there isn't a specific number of treatments that they recommend because they say that every person is different. So you might need 1. You might need 4
or 10.
You might need like there's really, and to be fair, because I really do want to be fair and I don't want to be completely biased, it's also new. There's not a lot of science. So I get that the company is also, at least what they're saying is that they're still trying to figure out what those parameters are. They're still doing a lot of testing. They have been approved by like the equivalent of the FDA of Mexico. And they said that they're also now working to get the FDA in the United States to approve it. So there's this big push and there's this big sort of the only way I can say it is honestly, like I did this call and it's like they're selling it.
Yeah.
They're selling it as this is working. We promise it's working. We're trying to get everybody else on board.
It's a business.
Now, yes. So, and I got to tell you, it felt like a sales call when I did this Q&A. Like it really put me on edge. And I'm super excited about this particular device because, and this is where it gets interesting, right? Because so far what I've told you is a little bit of background and a little bit of sketch, right? But I know families that have done this treatment.
Yeah.
And they report the most amazing results. And these are people that I trust. And when I say that is like, these are families that I have known since the beginning of my journey that I communicate with. And I genuinely do trust their judgment. But there's something that doesn't sit well with me about the whole thing. And then I have the flip side of like, but if you're seeing results and families are reporting results, how much of the science do you care about? Does that make sense? Like you're almost like, it's like a push and pull where it's like, this doesn't sound right. This doesn't feel right. But then families are saying this. And here's where the additional layer comes on, Britt, right? Because when you're at that age, right, because I'm talking about kids, children right now. When you're at that age, you go through bursts of development.
Yeah.
That's just what happens. Brain injury or not, disabled or not, you're going to go through bursts of development. And I always wonder is, without that treatment, would that child have achieved what they achieved anyway, just from growth, development, growing and all these things? So here I am just stuck in the middle of like, what is this? Is this some BS that somebody be selling for $50,000? Or is this something that is on the horizon? And this is the problem with pseudoscience in the medical field.
Yeah.
It is so complex.
It's so complex. It's so fucking unregulated. And that's what's really terrifying to me.
Yeah.
I'm going to get a lot of people not liking me for saying this, but I think there's also something to be said that this is a lot of time and this is a lot of money invested.
A lot of money.
And if I'm putting that much time and that much money into something, I'm going to start seeing shit that may not actually be happening. You know?
Yes.
I mean, it's a lot of fucking money. I don't want to, like, downplay and say that these kids aren't doing anything or doing, you know, it's so tough because it's not my kid, so I don't want to say that. But I will say that, like, I mean, God, even, like, intensives. Cyrus does great with intensives, but there are times when, like, he'll come out of an intensive and he'll, you know, do something that he wasn't doing before, and I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing, and it, like, fizzles out after a few weeks, you know? Yeah. And it's like, well, yeah, he just spent the last 3 weeks, you know, doing this on repetition.
Doing it so just nonstop.
You know, but then there's that feeling inside of me that's like, he's gonna do all of this shit because we just spent so much money and we've been here for 3 weeks and we've been driving back and like, it's so much invested and it's so much on our kids too that we don't want to put our kids through all of this for nothing. And so that's why I think it's this really delicate, like, balancing act of are these parents actually seeing these outcomes? Or are they wanting to see these outcomes? And I don't want to be the bad guy saying, you know, one way or the other.
That's the thing, though. You cannot ignore the fact that you have parents that want the best for their children. And as much as we try to regulate our expectations, people have to understand there is an element of almost brain trickery going on here, you know, because you are desperate, right? Like I would love to make Lino's life just less painful. Cerebral palsy, spasticity, all these things are uncomfortable and painful. Do I want to take away his disability? No, but I don't want him to be suffering all the time. Right. And anytime I can ease that suffering for him, I am desperate to do that. I am desperate to do that. And when you're partaking in these experimental treatments, you have to factor that in. You know, you have to factor in what is almost like that placebo effect, you know, what are you creating as a result when it may not actually be a direct result of the treatment? And you're right. I don't want to say that because that's going to hurt a lot of people's feelings, but it's true.
Yeah.
Parents, I love you guys. You're doing an amazing job, but you gotta think about this. Like, you gotta think about what are you projecting onto the results, rather than what are the actual results. And it's also tricky, right? Because when I think about this particular, like the neurocytonics or a lot of these new treatments, I also think about how stem cells went through the same thing, right?
Yeah, I have issues.
Well,
with
we're gonna touch on stem cells.
I know. I have an issue with the stem cell.
But stem cells did go through a whole phase of like, this is pseudoscience. What does it actually do? And there are benefits to stem cells.
Yes.
I know what you're going to say, and I can't wait to hear it. But there are also issues with stem cells because, again, it is not a miracle cure, right? There is nothing out there that is going to fix a brain injury. There's nothing out there that's going to completely, like, there's no miracles, people.
No. And I want to preface the stem cell thing. I have a love-hate relationship with stem cells, okay? I do. Hear me out. So there are legit stem cell treatments, right? Like, very legit. Like, they do stem cell treatments in hospitals. I'm prefacing this by saying my mom had cancer. She had multiple myeloma. She still does. It's just in remission. But she had multiple myeloma. She was given, I think, about, like, 2 to 3 years on diagnosis. And she went through, like, so much chemo and all this. And then they were like, you know what? We're going to attempt a stem cell transplant for you. And she went to the hospital. Thankfully, a local hospital does it. And it was wild. It was wild. She had, I think it was a week of, like, just intense chemotherapy before her transplant. They took out the stem cells. They did all they had to do. Then they put the stem cells back in. She was in the hospital for, July, August, until September. So like July to September, she was in the hospital. She was essentially in like lockdown quarantine. We could only visit for like a half hour to 45 minutes a day. Wow. We had to wear masks. We had to when you go into the NICU and you have to like scrub in and all, it was the same exact thing because she had no immunity whatsoever. They completely depleted her immunity. She was so sick from it. I mean, this was hell for her, literal hell for her. But she came out of it, and she maybe 6 months later was in full remission, which is wild. She would not have been in full remission if she had not had this stem cell transplant. And then it was like, she's still, I think to this day, is still getting her, baby shots. Like they had to do all of the vaccines all over because they completely got depleted from her body. It was insane. It was insane. But, those are like legit stem cells. I know like Duke is doing stem cells, yes. You can go in and do the clinical trials for that. Like these are all very legit. Oh, and this is where I'm going to get so many people mad.
Oh, you're going to piss off everybody.
I'm going to piss off everybody, guys. Like these are legit programs. If you are seeing a fucking chiropractor or a neuropathic doctor who is claiming to do stem cells on your child's, like, what the fuck are we doing?
It's so problematic.
It's so problematic. Okay, and here's the thing. Like, I know the doctor in Arizona. Like, I don't know him personally. I know of him. I know of families that go there. They spend all this money. They fundraise. They do these big, giant trips. They go down there. They do rounds of stem cells. I'm just going to tell you guys, like, if you have not looked into the way that the medical industry functions in Arizona, highly suggest doing this, okay? It is a wildly unregulated industry, specifically in Arizona.
It's actually also like that in Monterrey, Mexico, where all these programs like neurocytonics. It's like the Wild West of
it's the
like
wild
medical
West of medicine.
Innovation.
I'm telling you right now, Google like Wild West Medicine Arizona, and it will come up of like the investigations that's like it is so unbelievably unregulated. You have these people that are going down to Arizona with a chiropractic license. I'm pretty sure, because, Kyle's a dentist. I'm pretty sure fucking dentists are doing shit they should not be doing down in Arizona because they can. It's just this wildly unregulated thing. And these people are preying on those who are in pain. They're claiming that all of these treatments are just going to cure your pain, take your pain away. Do you know how desperate people fucking are when they're in chronic pain?
Desperate.
And then they're preying on parents because you know how desperate we are when we don't want our kids in chronic pain?
Yeah.
God, and it's a cash industry. That's the thing. It's fucking cash. It's like, of course they're going to prey on it. Like,
of course they
don't
take
money.
Insurance.
This is why I have such an issue with this because it's so predatory.
It is.
It's just so not okay. And you are taking an absurd amount of money out of these parents' pockets that could go towards things that are peer-reviewed and have the science and the outcomes behind it. And the thing is that I don't want to fault the parents. That's the thing is I'm not faulting the parents because we're all trying to do what we can for our kids.
I don't even think it's necessarily even not faulting parents. I think it's the devil's advocate side of it where it's like there's also a medical industry, particularly in the U.S., but obviously we see it outside of the U.S., i.e. Mexico, Panama, all these other places. Mexico. But there's this counter argument of, well, the healthcare industry and the medical industry in the US, it is also quasi bullshit, right? Like you're funding the FDA and these people who are also doing it for money in their pocket. So there's this counter argument of naturopathic, homeopathic, the FDA won't recognize it. That's because they know it's right and they want us on medication.
Because big pharma.
But that's a valid argument. I wouldn't even say almost. That's a valid argument too, right? So now you're a parent who's desperate because you want your child to live the least painful, the least uncomfortable life they can with their disability, and you're caught between a rock and a hard place a lot of times because you're like, well, big pharma sucks ass, and
which
but
they do.
Also, pseudoscience that is charging you an arm and a leg also sucks ass. So let's just remember that.
Yeah, and this is where I want to get into that too, because the thing is that how many times do you fucking hear people be like, well, big pharma's just out for your money. They just want your money. They just make money off of cancer treatments. Who the fuck's giving away holistic remedies for free?
Exactly.
Like, who's doing that? Nobody's doing that.
It's the opposite end of the extreme.
Yes.
It's there's like two extremes.
And at least we have insurance that more or less will hopefully pay for medication. Like I'm not paying out of pocket for my kid's seizure medication, but if somebody comes up to me and wants me to rub tea tree oil on them, I'm probably paying out of pocket for fucking tea tree oil. Like none of that.
And here's another layer of this argument is also innovation and advancement in medical technology. Also, you have to have this sort of exploration of new techniques and things as well. It's so tricky. It really is so tricky. Like, let's just say, right, devil's advocate conversation here, because I really want to share both sides. Let's just say neurocytonics turns around and actually is working. That is a valid treatment. Maybe it doesn't do what they're saying it does, but maybe it does help with brain injuries. Then wouldn't you love to have been on the starting side of that to help push it, to help make it something that's viable? There's these constant sort of You're like, what side do I stand on here?
No, see, here's the thing. Like, I'm going to be the guy that says, like, no, I don't want to be on the starting end. I want to be on the finishing. Like, I want to be on the end that has, like, the developed science. You know what I mean?
I agree with that. I actually do agree with that. Like, I don't want to be the one who's trying it out. I don't. Not on my own child, for sure. I think more what I meant is maybe it is something that does work, but you wouldn't know unless you tried. And so there's so many different arguments to come at this from. And then you think about just the medical trial aspect of it. Putting our children, who we are essentially stripping the autonomy from, because we're not asking them to do this, right? We're choosing as parents to do these treatments. And we're putting our children through treatments that, one, could have really damaging effects. If you don't fully understand what's happening, it could have damaging effects. I mean, simple as this, Botox is a treatment that is accepted medically and considered relatively safe, but there are huge risks with Botox. And we go ahead and we give our children Botox injections for spasticity. It's the same thing. Like, you also have to sit there and think about, what are you doing to your child, or potentially doing to your child, that is life-threatening and damaging? And for what? Is the really big question.
And that's the thing, too, is that we can do that even for the evidence-based stuff, right? Like, we can do that for medications, we can do that for procedures and this and that. Just to give an example, Kyle and I, when Cyrus left the NICU, so when Cyrus was in the NICU, he started having seizures at hour 20. And so the thing for neonates, not so much now, but then, I mean, just 4.5 short years ago, was phenobarbital.
Yeah.
Give him phenobarb.
Oh, my God.
Bolus the hell out of phenobarb.
Lino was like comatose from the amount of pheno he was on.
Yeah. So they ended up actually like almost overdosing. Like, they took his phenobarb levels, I think, like the next day, because they had to give him multiple boluses. And they were like, whoa, we have to like seriously cut back, because his phenobarb levels were like almost triple what they should have been. Yeah. That was the information we were presented with. That's what, at the time, 4.5 years ago, was evidence-based. That's what they used for neonates. You know, and the regret that Kyle and I have all the time, and we talk about it to this day, is that they kept him on fucking phenobarb after he left the NICU. They didn't change him to anything. Yes.
And I found out that so many people don't do that. So many neonatologists and neurologists don't do that. They stop it before they leave NICU. And I was so pissed when I found that out.
And Kyle and I sit there and we think about it all the time, and we have so much regret over the fact that Cyrus was on such a very strong barbiturate for almost the first year of his life. I mean, this is a drug that people abuse because that's the kind of side effect it has. And again, we are just doing what we know with the information that's presented to us, right?
What's considered safe in the medical field. So you're like, okay, well, this is the protocol. This is safe enough for him. And so you're just kind of going with it. And that's another part of this valid argument is just doing what is evidence-based and in the medical field that can be really tricky and dangerous. So then when you're exploring things that are outside those boundaries and have no regulation, it's the same thing, guys. Like there's a lot of risk. Yes, there can be benefit, but you really have to sit here and think about what you're doing and why you're doing it and what are your goals for doing it. Like what's the intention here?
I think it's really important to think too, like who's fucking held accountable if something doesn't work out and something goes wrong. I mean, that's like, come on.
I can guarantee you nobody.
No, well, and so that's the thing. If you look into the investigations that happened in Arizona with the stem cell stuff, every single complaint, they don't look into patient complaints because it's not regulated. So they have all of these complaints that get sent in for,
and they just kind of sit there.
And they just sit there. And nobody's held accountable.
They can also, if they were held accountable in the state, let's say Arizona, they can just leave and go practice somewhere else because that's how the United States functions. Is you can license in another state and still do what you're doing.
Yep, it's crazy.
There's a lot of, I feel like mostly everything in the U.S. is actually not as regulated as people really truly think. But there's a lot of shit that's just out there, and it's fucking terrifying. It really is. And I was just thinking, and this is a good segue into kind of the MLM, or not even just MLM, but these people who are all holistic and they love CBD oil. Now, let me tell you something. I actually do love CBD oil, and Lino is on CBD oil, and it has been a life changer for Lino. But I also need to tell you that it gives me the most anxiety because CBD oil can permanently damage the liver. And when I say permanently damage, I mean a lot of other things that you ingest, mostly medication, that is metabolized through the liver, and you start to see liver changes. You can stop that, and the liver heals itself and corrects itself. CBD oil actually is known to not have that if you don't stop it soon enough. So if the damage is too severe because of CBD oil, there's no coming back from it. That has always and forever terrified the shit out of me. But there are people out there on the internet, on social media, and they're like, give him some CBD. He's got seizures. CBD will do the trick. That is not the fucking case, people. That is not how it works. There are definitely certain types of epilepsy that can be controlled, or at least get very decent control with CBD oil, but that is not every type of epilepsy. And just because somebody is having seizures, CBD is not going to do the trick.
And also, every person's different.
Yeah.
I think about essential oils.
Oh my God. How many messages? Have you tried essential oils?
I have so much hatred. So much hatred. It is like, people see my Instagram account and they see me and they see Cyrus. Mostly they see Cyrus. And we are a fucking target. We are a target for essential oils people. But even essential oils, it doesn't work the same for everybody. And now there's all of these things that are coming out that's like, well, maybe this isn't so good to be inhaling all of this shit all the time, you know, and then, but then it's like allergic reactions can happen and things like that. And it's like, these things aren't, you know, even for the MLM or the holistic and all that, it's not going to be the same for every person.
It's not.
It's not. And, you know, like I said, I'm not blaming the parents. I'm not.
No.
They have their kids' best interest at heart. So I don't blame them. I blame the predatory behavior because I'm telling you guys right now, these fucking people are not going after healthy people.
No,
they're not.
And the blanket statements of like, oh, well, this will definitely help. That's not the truth. You know, if you, it's also different. I feel like if you're more transparent and you're more honest about the fact that, yes, every person is different. But if you want to try it, you know, like, but that's not how they push it.
No.
They push it that you shouldn't be doing any of this. You should be doing this.
Yeah.
And this is going to be what's the best for you.
And it's this like shameful layer of like, how dare you have your kid on pharmaceuticals, right? Where it's like, pharmaceuticals literally saved my kid's life.
And that's dangerous too.
That's very dangerous.
Because trust me when I tell you, I do not want my child on any pharmaceutical.
Oh, no, neither do I. Kyle and I were just talking about that.
Yes, this is not what I want for him. This
Nope.
is not what I want for our family. Every time I have to increase or decrease, it's hell. My child goes through withdrawals. My child, like, I don't want this at all. And I also tried a full-blown pharmaceutical wean, and it was the worst experience of my entire life. And I had to accept that as much as I don't want these things for my child, they allow him to live his best life. They allow him to do what he does every day.
I mean, at the end of the day, there's a lot of kids that are on pharmaceuticals that are just happier on pharmaceuticals.
I mean,
Like, parents don't want to do this. I mean, even the kid's on famotidine, and I don't want him on famotidine.
No. Yeah.
But at the end of the day, he is a much happier and much more comfortable human being.
Less discomfort, less pain. I mean, with the epilepsy part, there's also obviously it's just safer. Like
it's
you're
safer.
Reducing the risk of actual fatality or SUDEP.
Yeah.
I mean, there's elements of the benefits versus the risks, and especially with epilepsy, the benefit is my child's alive.
Yeah, and so I think that that's why I get really, really pissed off when, and I, you know, we've all experienced it at some point, I'm sure. I mean, I see moms that literally, like, in their profile say, like, no MLMs, don't come at me, because we are targets. And that's why I get so mad. It's because, like, you're not fucking living it. The people who are doing these MLM things, they're most likely not living it. And I'm telling you right now, this is going to make me such a bad person to say this. The people who are quote unquote living it and saying, oh, all of these things cured my kid, doing it holistically, doing MLM, you know, essential oils and this and that. I'd like to see what goes on behind closed doors.
Of course. Come on.
You know, like,
listen, I have
really
a confession.
like to see it.
Confess
to us.
And if you've known me long enough and have followed my ridiculous social media journey, I was part of an MLM.
Oh, no,
Don't say it ever again. I actually technically still am. But only because I actually do use the products for myself. But that being said, I do love the products I use. Mine was like a skin hair care thing.
Yes, I remember.
And I do use the products, I'm not going to lie. But I initially started using the products and I love them. I had no interest in actually being a part of like the actual selling phase. I am just not a person that's good at selling.
Mm-hmm.
So I really should have never even tried it. But I really needed the money. So I was like, maybe this is like passive income. Like I could just like promote it online and, you know, make some extra cash on the side. So I tried it. And, you know, some of my mentors were trying to find my target audience. And a lot of the push was like, hey, but what about like your medical moms? They can do this too and make money on the side. Yeah. And it never sat well with me to do that. I really don't want to throw shade and I don't want to throw out hate, but it is what it is, the statement. There are a lot of parents, particularly women and mothers in the community who have disabled children who do market towards other mothers in the community of disabled children. And I get it. I do get it. A lot of us are stay-at-home moms. Some of us are single moms who just can't leave the house because we have to care for our children, but we need to make income. So I do 100% get it. I don't want to throw shade on that aspect of it, but it is predatory.
Courtney and I talk about this a lot in all of our episodes, where there is just not enough funding, there's not enough resources for families like ours. And so this is like, it puts us in a rock and a hard place, right? But I think that if you're gonna do it, just be straightforward about it. You know,
Transparent.
Yeah, okay, so I have two stories. One directly involves me, one does not. But my first story was when Cyrus was really little. He must have been, I think this was like prior to GTube and all that, so he must have been like 9 months old or so. This was when I was like sharing a lot more about, you know, what our life looked like. I think I had a blog going on, ex-blogger
Didn't we all
here.
at some
Didn't
point?
we all at some point have, you know, and I love writing. That's the thing, is like I love writing. And so that was kind of just like an outlet for me. And so it's when I like started gaining not that I really have many followers, but like I started gaining followers, and like, you know, like people within the community kind of were reaching out and this and that. So, you know, great, fine. One mom, let me tell you, there is a special place in hell for people like this. One mom reached out to me, right? Super sweet, like super warm, super welcoming. She had an older kid who was disabled. He's probably like 8 or 9, you know, like, oh, I see you, mama. I see what you're going through. And like, you know, I was 9 months in. I had no idea what the fuck was going on. And so I was kind of craving for like that kind of reassurance from other people. Yeah. And so she was, like I said, like really warm, really welcoming. And then it turned into this whole like, well, I have a Facebook community of other medical moms, and I think that you would be really great. Like, I think you would be so good to talk about your journey, and I think it would be so therapeutic, and I think you'd be able to help out a lot of other moms that are going through the medical journey. Like, your writing is so good. All of this shit, right? And I was like, this is great. Like, I really want to build up that community. I want to have that support. I want to see other families like ours, right? And so I was like really excited. And she's like, okay, well, it's a private group, so here's the link, just go request it, and this and that. Courtney.
Oh, goodness.
I went into this group, and I was like, oh, this is great, like, we can all talk about our feelings. It was a fucking MLM group. I shit you not. It was like she was a fucking coach for some, like, MLM shit. And she was a coach, and, like, this is what she did, and she sold her products through here, and all, and I was like, this bitch...
That's the lack of transparency. That's the lack of transparency, problem, man.
But let me tell you what, that moment really fucked me up. It built such a distrust for myself within the community because, like I said, again, I was new to all of this. Like,
then you're like, who's actually genuine or who's just BSing me in my fucking comments?
Yes. What was so wild is that she just came at me and was so solely focused on the fact that my kid's disabled and the fact that I'm a mom
she
trying to raise
knew how to manipulate
you. She had the followers in her Facebook group.
Because we're desperate.
We're desperate.
That's the thing. Like, when you're sitting there and really, you know, you talk about it a lot, that validation aspect of when you're just going through it and you feel so alone and you just feel so isolated, especially in the early days, right? In those early years when you're just grasping to find somebody who understands and can be on the same level as you. That's predatory because
that's predatory.
She preyed on you and she preyed on that aspect of you.
And there was no like disclosure, right? There's no disclosure of being like, this is for me to make my money.
Exactly.
And she's still doing it. That's the thing. She's still doing it. And, you know, don't do that, guys. Just don't fucking do that. That messed me up so bad. And I think, I don't know. I don't want to say like I have a huge chip on my shoulder in terms of the parenting community, but I think that's kind of, that was a turning point for me. And it was so early on, right? Like, it was so early on.
That was a defining moment for you.
It
and
was.
rightfully so. Because, you know, Especially another thing we talk about is the mental health aspect of all of this. And we're so fragile. Many of us, I can't say all of us, but most and many of us are so fragile from that perspective that to use that as your tactic to get in or to like hook us is really fucked.
It's really, especially new moms. New moms. Do you know how terrified we are?
Fucking
like,
terrified and desperate. Terrified and desperate.
Like I said, like Cyrus must have been 6-9 months old. I don't even know that you and I were like really talking.
It's interesting that you even just mentioned that, because even then, even the beginning of just communicating with like, hey, like you, like another mom who's going through it, there was still this kind of hesitancy of like, who do you trust? Who's real? Like who's, you know, and then to have it completely shattered like that is really fucking scary. I'm not going to lie, because you're there trying to find a community.
Yeah.
And then it was like, just kidding. I was using you because I'm hoping you'll buy my products.
It's so isolating when you're that early on, right? Because you have the people that you know that have been in your life. Unless they're experiencing it, they're not going to get it.
No, yeah. You start drifting away from the people that are in your family, and you're looking for new community, essentially.
I mean, that's it. You want to talk to somebody who's experiencing it and isn't going to give you that toxic positivity. So, like, you're trying to find this. And when you're early on and then you're, like, terrified of what the future might hold, you're terrified of diagnosis and this and that. Like, what? I mean... it was awful. It was disgusting.
That is awful.
That's I have to say, like, it's disgusting. Just don't do that, right? So that's my like personal experience with it, and I'm pretty sure I went on a whole tangent after that of like how shitty MLMs are and like how predatory people are to kids with disabilities, because it's true. Like even within our own community, it's true.
Oh, yeah.
It's so predatory. And so like my other story I have is, we were at therapy one day, and his therapist was telling me the story. She was working with a kid, and during their session, the mom was on speakerphone with a quote-unquote healer. And as the kid's doing this session, this healer is like, I've cast out an alien from your body, and I've cast out another alien.
What?
And Cyrus's therapist was like, this was the most wild thing I've ever experienced in my entire life.
What the holy fuck was that?
And so, I know, and like this guy on the other end of the phone was like, I've cast out 13 aliens from your body. It was wild. And I guess like the mom hung up and was like telling Cyrus's therapist how unbelievable this guy is and this healer and how he's the reason that her kid is doing so much. Meanwhile, it costs like $200 per fucking phone call for this guy to just sit on the other end, probably watching TV, casting out aliens.
I was just going to say, yeah.
You know
I doubt he's even actually as holistic as he actually says.
Exactly.
He's probably on the other end eating dominoes, watching
Exactly,
fucking Vanderpump
right?
Rules, like...
And that's what I mean. And we're sitting there, and I was like, it cost her, like, it was like $150 or $200 for like a 15-minute phone call, if that. And I was like, it cost that much? Like, what the fuck am I doing with my life? Like, if it cost him that much money. And we were talking about it, and she was like, the worst part is that there was no acknowledging what her son's doing. There's no acknowledging the hard work that he's putting in and I'm putting in with him, and like the fact that he's going through hell having to do all of this all of the time. There's no acknowledging that. It's some guy at the other end of a phone that you're paying $100 and something to cast out aliens. And parents are doing all of this pseudoscience, and they're doing all of these things for their kids. And instead of really, really acknowledging the hard work that your kid's putting in, it's the other factors.
Yeah. Which honestly, I think a lot of us need therapy more than we need pseudoscience.
I agree. And, and I think that it goes back to the, we are not immune to being ableist as parents. And I mean,
I mean, it's ingrained in all of us because it's ingrained in society. And we're now a generation that's working to break it down, acknowledge it, and tear it down, essentially.
Yeah.
Anybody who will sit there and say that, oh, no, I am definitely not ableist, I'm sorry, but...
No, we all are.
We all are.
You are.
I am. We all are.
We're all ableist to some point.
Yes, exactly. And we're all ableist in certain situations and with certain factors. It's just fucking society, this ableist. And you can't change that. You could just fight it and try to change the future of it, know, because it's just there. So let's not pretend it's not.
No, I mean, even still with me, there are moments where I'll catch thoughts within my head and I'm like, ugh. We're not,
God,
know?
I have so many cringed thoughts and I'm like, why? Why did I just think that? That's so bad.
That's so bad. And at least we're catching ourselves doing it. But that's the thing is you and I are, and there are a lot of parents like us that are putting in the work.
Yeah, to be better, yeah.
I don't know that that's ever gonna necessarily go away to even a minute extent because it's just what we grew up with. It's all we knew. I never really knew disability before Cyrus or had experience with it. We were still raised during a time when there was the special ed class and then there was everyone else. And so you weren't, exposed to it. So I don't think that we're ever going to go away from that. I think that you just have to keep it in check, and I think that that's one reason why we're discussing that. I think parents especially have to be aware of how unbelievably vulnerable they are to these predatory factors. If you're spending all of this money, if you're investing all of this time, the outcomes that you're seeing, are they legitimate outcomes or are they what you want to see? Because you are making all of these big decisions for your kids. Sit back and think about that and just don't be preyed upon and don't prey upon others.
I think we can even kind of end the discussion on a very common topic for us is separating your trauma from your child's trauma too, right? Because there is an element of how much of what we do when we pursue these holistic pseudoscience treatments and avenues, how much of that is really more for us. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of thought about that. And again, I want to highlight, and I hope people really genuinely listen to what we said throughout this episode, is that we get that there's different angles of looking at a situation and there's different arguments for these situations. And I get it. But there also needs to be a moment of reflection about the bigger picture and about what is more internalized and more of a personal aspect versus actually what it benefits your child and what it does for your child. And gosh, man, it's tough to navigate this because all we want is the best for our kids.
Yeah, it's tough and it's messy.
It is so messy.
It's so messy.
Dude, I would pay $50,000 a day if it meant that my child didn't have to be in pain or suffer.
I think that's it too, right? I think that if you're doing it to take away the pain and the suffering and the things that do reduce quality of life, right? Because nobody wants chronic pain. Nobody wants to be vomiting. Nobody wants any of that, right? I think if you're doing it for that reason, that's good. Okay, yeah, nobody wants their kid to suffer. End of the day. I think if you're doing it because you don't want your kid in a wheelchair or to use mobility aids or you want your kid to eat by mouth because that's not...
That shouldn't be the goal.
No, and your child's disability is not something that needs to be fixed. It's not something that needs to be cured. If there is an aspect of that disability that's causing pain and suffering, and yes, I understand that, but the disability where your kid needs a mobility aid, you don't have to fix that. Mobility aids make people's lives better. And if you're spending $50,000 for your kid to not use a wheelchair, that's ableist. I'm sorry.
No, 1,000%. And this even goes as simple as doing things like even intensives. Like if your goal with an intensive is like, well, I want my child to walk, but realistically, your child's disability, the likelihood of your child walking is very slim, you're doing the intensive for the wrong reason.
Yeah. Yes.
Because intensives, you should have a target goal, but the target goal should be to improve the life of your child.
Yes.
Feeding therapy, that's another thing. Like we do feeding therapy not because I am like, well, Lino's going to eat by mouth one day and that's it. We can get rid of the G-tube. That's not it at all, honestly. For me, it's one, he enjoys eating, meaning he enjoys flavors. He enjoys tasting things. Like the kid loves ice cream. The kid loves puttanesca sauce. I mean, like we're talking, like I want him to enjoy that. But I also want him to learn how to safely swallow.
Yeah, and manage
right? Because safely, yes. So see, like my target goal is to prevent him from pneumonia, aspiration, choking, dying simply on his own saliva. I'm not sitting here doing feeding therapy because I'm like, yes, our target goal is to like never have him eat by tube again.
Yeah. I mean, you know how I don't, I have big feelings towards goals in therapy, so you know how I feel about that. But all of Cyrus's therapists are very aware of the fact that I hate goals. I hate goals.
Yeah.
I do not put goals on my kid. But the only goals that I find acceptable for Cyrus is confidence, comfort, and independence. Whatever that looks like. That's it. Whatever it looks like.
Exactly. And that's what everybody should be going into, especially therapy for. And I know this is slightly off topic, but it's going off the base of the idea of like, what are we doing this for? Who are we doing it for? Exactly. Because it's not about you as a parent. I'm sorry, but it's really not about you as a parent. And you really need to think about the autonomy of your child and what makes your child's life better. And this goes with pseudoscience. This goes with intensive. This goes with the whole thing, right? And this is the core. Yes, this is the core of this conversation. Because I remember even when we first went to Napa for the first time and they asked my goals, and I set no specific goals, meaning I wasn't like, I want him to roll. Like, no. When they asked me what my goals were for Lino, I said independence, confidence, strength, and endurance. Because all of those things are going to help him overall in his everyday life. And that's really all it is. I want him to understand he can move in whichever fashion he can and whichever fashion he wants to. And I want to give him the opportunity to do it how he wants and if he wants.
What works best for him,
Exactly. I don't need him to roll. I don't need him to walk. I don't need him to do any of these things.
And if he's happy not doing that, then let the kid not do it.
So be it.
Exactly. I'll never forget we were in an intensive. I think it might have even been Cyrus's last intensive. And I was talking to some mom, asking her questions because her son had the same diagnosis that my friend's baby had just been diagnosed with. They were still in the NICU. So I was just talking to her about it. And I'll never forget this mom. Now, this kid was younger than Cyrus, and she looked at me, and she was like, oh, this is like his 10th intensive or something like that. Like, we travel around, and this is all we do. And I had Cyrus right next to me, and Cyrus was in his wheelchair. And I'll never forget, she looked at me dead in the eye, and she was like, this is the reason my kid isn't wheelchair bound.
Oh.
And I was like, okay, have a nice day. And I looked at Cyrus and I was like, let's roll on out of here, Cy Guy. And like, because I was like, I'm done with this conversation now. Like, what? I know, like, right. And like, Cyrus kind of shot me a look like, the fuck did this bitch just say? Like, he looked at me and he was like, what? And I was like, let's roll on out of here. Like, let's go. Like,
but see, that's so fucking problematic on so many levels.
To each their fucking own, but I think you have to understand as a parent the things that you do with your child directly affects your child. It's like Courtney said, it's not about you as a parent.
Yeah.
It's not about your life looking a certain way because your kid's not using mobility aids. And it's not about the idea that you had for your child to not use mobility aids and things like that. It directly affects your kid. And if you feel better putting your kids through back to back intensives because you don't want your kid in a wheelchair, but your kid is not really having the best quality of life. I mean, these kids are kids. Let them have fucking childhoods, right?
And you got to think about the physical effects and the mental effects of it.
Yeah. And listen, it's tough. I know it's tough. I know it's so tough to take a step back and accept everything, and kind of let life play out.
Your trauma versus their trauma, right?
Yeah, your trauma versus their trauma. Yeah.
Like, we get it, and we're throwing a lot of shade and hate, and we're not meaning to.
No, because the thing is Courtney and I have all been there.
Yes. I have been there, and
We've all been there.
And I don't want to push people away, and I've said this before, that if I do push you away, my hope is that we pull you back after you think about it, because these are difficult topics to talk about, guys. It's not easy.
Like I said, Courtney and I, we are not immune to any of it. I will be the first person to say that, I remember when Cyrus was really little and he was doing a ton of outpatient therapy. And I remember seeing a kid there, and a kid was using crutches. And I specifically remember to this day turning to his therapist and saying, maybe Cyrus will use crutches. That's our best worst case scenario. Yeah. And I think about it and I'm like,
I've totally thought the same thing. I'm like, oh no, he'll walk one day, but what a gait trainer, it'll be fine. Or maybe the sticks or,
Right? That's our best worst case scenario. And I was and I think about that now and I'm like, oh, fuck me. But we've all been there, and it's taken growth, it's taken reflection, it's taken a hell of a lot of therapy for me,
Yeah, no, but it's true.
And we're all guilty about it to some extent, but I think, when you take a step back, you separate your trauma, you're then able to give your kid the absolute best quality of life, and you are able to be such an ally for the disabled community.
Yep.
And that's the whole end goal of this podcast.
That is it.
We understand that during every episode we're probably going to piss some people off, and that's not, we don't want to, but
I think maybe we do a little bit. Only for the simple fact, it's not to piss you off or offend you because I get pleasure out of it. I think, though, it is partly our goal because it'll get you thinking. Yeah,
listen, I have changed some minds by very much so pissing some people off. Yeah. And sometimes that's what it takes. Yeah.
I hope you guys really honestly engage in discussion when we start posting clips about this, or even on our website, because this is a topic that I want us to hash out. I really do, because I think it's really important to understand what we choose to treat our children with and for, and who is it actually for? Is it us or is it them? So I really hope you guys will send us some comments and talk about this in the comment section, because I kind of want it to get a little messy. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, a little bit. And listen, I think that we touched on a lot of things that a lot of parents are doing. Courtney and I, you both know people personally that do the stem cells in Arizona. Yeah. All of this, and
I mean, I'm still pursuing and researching neurocytonics, so
Kyle and I were literally just talking about looking more into the Duke University clinical trials, because we have the cord blood.
Oh, I have it too for Luca. So, yep.
Yeah. So we were we're going to do that. So we're not negating all of that, but we're just saying it's tread lightly on both ends. You know, don't be preyed upon. Don't prey upon others. Realize that you're, not just you, but your kid is a target, a massive target for these people.
Absolutely.
They're not coming after people that are healthy.
Nope.
I have anxiety. Listen, I've been so open about my mental health issues in the past, even before Cyrus was born. I never once had somebody come up to me, as open as I am about my mental health issues, and say, I have an essential oil that can treat that. It was only once I had Cyrus and he had very visible disabilities that we're now targets. So, be careful. Anyways, we hope that we didn't piss too many people off. We're hoping that, we open up the discussion, because we love having the discussion.
Yes.
And if you're still here, we really appreciate it. we really appreciate you made it through this episode.
And we love you for it. So thank you.
Anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in to the Bitching and Bolusing Podcast. Until next time. Thanks for listening to the Bitching and Bolusing Podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe for future episodes. Previous episodes can be heard on Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and iHeartRadio. If you like what we said, please be sure to give us a share. You can follow us on Instagram at Bitching and Bolusing. And you can visit us at www.bitchingandbolusing.com.